Hello, and welcome to another episode of Homeschool Moms Unfiltered, your source for messy, imperfect, and I feel given the topic today, it's important to say right at the top of the episode, secular, inclusive, progressive homeschool advice and community. So I'm your host, Amanda, and my amazing co-host is...
Hello, I'm Megan.
Yeah. All right. So like I said, we're secular and progressive as a podcast and as a community, which is a bit like finding a needle in a haystack in the homeschool community. But here you will find no Bible verses in our math curriculum, and we definitely aren't confused about woke being an insult.
Right? I mean, the Merriam-Webster definition of woke is, quote, aware of and actively attentive to important societal facts and issues, especially issues of racial and social justice, end quote. So it's like, ooh, what an insult. I mean, really, you're coming at me with some really hard stuff. I mean, if that's an insult and you're telling me by default then that you're not woke, that means the opposite, meaning you're not aware and you're ignoring important societal facts and issues, and you're proud of that.
Well, I mean, listen, we all know Merriam-Webster is just a left-wing arm of the socialist propaganda machine, and it's clearly funded by celebrities who are secretly deep state democratic operatives, or maybe aliens in human suits. I'm really sure. I think I have my conspiracies like a little mixed up there, right? I mean,
John F. Kennedy Jr. is involved somehow.
yeah. Yep. So, right. Needless to say, although we'll say it anyway, we proudly affirm that Black Lives Matter, that we are ride or die for the LGBTQIA plus community. Freaking leave trans athletes alone. Like, I'm just like, what is happening here? Like, just shut up about the 5 poor athletes that are trying to like participate in collegiate sport. Just sit down and shut up. We believe in bodily autonomy. We do. It's true. Especially women's rights and bodily autonomy. We support the Texas elected officials who have fled the state of Texas to avoid being complicit in a grossly overdone gerrymandering scheme. And for those of you who don't know, did you know that Texas actually has more registered Democrats than Republicans? And then when idiots try to say to you, California already did it. Okay, let's be honest here. California has 25% of their voters registered Republicans. Obviously, voting in the United States is much more complicated than just those high level numbers. And like, we just put out a unit study all about voting rights in the US and gerrymandering and all of that. Like, there's so much to it, but California does not have very many registered Republicans. And if you were really going to do like votes, it's pretty easy to understand how, like, if only 25% of the population is Republican, they don't win very many majority votes. Like, it's not that complicated. However, if 45%, the largest percentage of your voters are Democrat, how are winning very many votes? That's a little confusing to me. Okay, sorry. I'm going to get off my soapbox. Maybe. No, yeah, for sure. Well, probably. I don't know. We're going to try. Sorry. This is where that poli-sci degree and like following current events. Like, sorry. Okay, we're moving on. We have an episode to talk about, but yeah.
And not just any episode. It's our first episode of season 3. We are kicking off season 3. We took a break between 1 and 2. Not doing it this time. We have too much to talk about. So we're excited. Kicking off season 3. And we thought we would do it with a bang. There's some pizzazz coming your way today. Today's topic is going to be an interesting one. Brace yourselves. We are going to be talking about the Tuttle Twins. If you're familiar with this resource, you might be thinking we have lost our freaking minds. I am pretty sure when I brought up this topic as a potential episode theme, Amanda thought I had lost my mind. But here's the deal. They get recommended all the time in homeschool groups, and we don't like to be out of the loop. When people are recommending stuff, people classify them as secular, and a lot of people jump on this bandwagon of like, no, they're bad, but why? How bad could they really be? So we thought we want to find out for ourselves.
Yeah. And I mean, like, look, just because they're clearly libertarian, and that is a political party in the United States. If it isn't wherever you live, just a little bit of background for you. I'm not sure how people think that these are secular, because that's like a whole other other thing. So anyway, we are going to answer just how bad they could be with actual quotes and important context so that you just feel informed going forward. Because again, it's that thing. It's nice to actually know instead of just being like, well, in this group, they talk about how bad it is. Like, we've got some specific examples so that you know without having to spend your own money. And I can confidently say that I speak for both of us when I say that these books were so much worse than we anticipated. Like, way, way worse. Yeah. Up until this episode, we would not have been able to give you such a clear, thorough answer as to what makes these books bad. Girl, do we have answers now?
Yes, we do. So this is going to be quite the episode. But first, we kick off every episode with a recap of our weeks. It's part of our anti-influencer, anti-social media highlight reel vibe that we're very happy to present over here. We have a lot to talk about today, though, so we're going to do a lightning round of our weekly recap. So in 90 seconds or less, Amanda, how's your week been?
My week has been a little rough. Homeschool wise, like mostly okay. But I think I talked about last week how my kid was supposed to be going to a drop off camp this week and was going to be like kind of long days for the whole week with his best friend. They were super excited. It got canceled on Saturday. So for us, it wasn't a huge deal, but his friend really wanted to see him. So there's just been a lot of extra like coordination and trying to make plans and like, okay, well, I can take your kid today so you can attend your appointments that you needed. And like, you can take my kid today and I'll take care of these things, like just a lot of extra stuff going on. And then on top of that, I decided that like this would be the week that I did major food planning and food prep. So I did in fact make 29 individual meals that are now sitting in my freezer to make life easier in the future. But it took a ton of work and I'm exhausted. And I also had a minor change to some of my medication. So I can't tell if I have a chronic illness flare coming or if I've just done too much or if it's just because my meds changed a bit and it's bothering me way more than I thought it would. But yeah, it's just like a shitty week. And then like on top of that, I read like 18 bazillion Tuttle Twins nonsense. And like, yeah, yeah.
They were pretty toxic. It was hard to like be thankful
Mhm.
that we're going to give you specific quotes so you have this ammunition to go into conversations with because reading them, like I need a shower afterwards. It's bad.
Yeah.
All right. So my 90-second recap. My oldest kiddo went to camp. It took him 22 and a half hours of travel to get there, but he got there. So he was pretty pumped. It took 3 flights and one of them was delayed. So he got rebooked and he handled it like a pro. So I was like, so, you know, when they go out and they adult successfully, you're like, yes, I haven't completely screwed this up, at least not on that front. So there's that. I bought myself a griddle for making grilled chicken, which has just made my week great. I'm going to eat grilled chicken when we're done. I have this marinade that's got like honey and apple cider vinegar and garlic and butter. It's going to be really, really good. So I'm excited about that. But the other update is my head's been up my ass all week because our visas still haven't come through, which means we have to fucking leave Portugal. And I'm really tired of having to leave Portugal. But I get it. My husband is also trying to renew one of his passports, not a US passport. And, you know, it says online, like we're normally at 3 months and we're way over. The shit show in America has trickled over to all these other countries that are now being inundated with applications. And so I get it, but I'm like, fuck. So anyway, we're leaving for England next week. We love England. I just don't want to be forced to go there. So, you know, it is what it is. But Tuttle Twins, here we go. Let's start off with a blanket. Holy crap. How does that sound? We could just kind of, ooh. So if you're not super familiar with Tuttle Twins, like maybe you've heard the name or maybe you haven't, let's start with what they are according to them. Okay. So according to them, they are quote unquote, an influential and expanding series of educational stories encouraging children to make sense of the world, end quote. The creators state that, quote, for too long, freedom loving parents didn't know how to teach the idea of liberty to their children, and they were left alone to try and shield their kids from the crazy ideas promoted by many teachers, government officials, and the media, end quote.
Yeah. So we're just going to reiterate again for anyone wanting to keep their children from learning the ideas of public school teachers and curriculum, but it's just like so woke. Those people are not our people. Okay. If you find what's happening in public school just way too woke, right? Like we struggle with the fact that what much of public school curriculum and teacher training like is it's like out of date and whitewashed and Eurocentric. And so, yeah, this constant idea from the Tuttle Twins that you have to protect your kids from the public schools because they're so woke. In the United States, especially, we've completely lost our grip on reality and what moderate looks like. And the rest of the world, hopefully, if you're listening to us, you're a little bit more aware, but the whole rest of the world is looking at us going like, do these people not understand what like moderate and liberal actually mean? No, for the most part, we don't. But anyway, here's what we did. We each sourced some Tuttle Twins books, different books and resources. We didn't want to fund their organization. Hello. We already knew that their values wouldn't align with ours. So some of the books we'll both be reviewing, and some of them we did separately. Okay. So, for example, we both read the US history textbook #1. I read textbook #2 as well because I was able to get them in a set secondhand. We read they have these little readers. They have a lot of them, unfortunately. And we read some of the same and some separate ones. So we'll have some overlap. We'll have some others, but we're going to be diving in with specifics, again, to give you a deeper understanding of what these resources actually espouse. All right, now I'm going to say this. We aren't professional reviewers, okay? We're opinionated homeschool moms, hence the title of our podcast. So I'm going to be real honest here. First, libertarian ideology generally grinds my gears and pisses me just right off. Okay. So it's no surprise that these books grind my gears and just piss me right the fuck off. But I was surprised by how they do it. Okay. So basically, if you're listening and you're like, okay, I get it. I'm never going to use the Tuttle Twins. I don't need to keep listening. Here's my too long didn't read version of this. You know how the most compelling lies are the ones with a bit of reality or truth kind of threaded throughout the whole story? That's these books in a nutshell. There's a kernel of truth that truly any reasonable person is like, oh yeah, or I see that, or that makes sense, or yeah, I knew that. And then they just go on without important context, steeped in racist undertones, and let's be honest, sometimes not undertones, presented as the honest truth. And frankly, your children, our children, all children deserve better.
Yeah. And even if you are in the camp of like, I'm never going to use the Tuttle Twins, so I'm out. It's kind of like the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders show on Netflix. Like, it's like a train wreck. You just want to stick around because you have no idea how bad this is going to get. Don't leave us. Okay. Brace yourself. Okay. So let's start off with the textbook, the history textbooks. I only had the first one. So we'll talk about that one first, which chronologically makes sense. Anyway,
I mean, only kind of. Come on.
We'll get into that. Exactly. We'll talk more. But in my opinion, too, I chose let's start off with the history textbook because for me, I felt like it was actually more mild than what I expected because I had done some of the readers first and I was like, what the fuck is happening here? So then when I got to the history textbook, I was like, okay, this is actually pretty toned down. I mean, listen, it's super anti-government and all of it is fear-mongering, like they're after you sort of way.
This still don't use it for history. Okay. There are so many good, affordable story version, audiobook version, engaging history options for young kids out there. There are so many options. So I would still say, like, don't use it for history. But comparatively speaking, it is not as gouge my eyeballs out, drink myself silly, and then rage for hours to my poor husband and son as bad.
My kids have gotten it all week. My kids are like, why are you still reading these books? I'm like, my kids for the podcast.
I know. If I had seriously known how horrendous these books were when Meagan first suggested this, I would have told her to shove this idea up her ass and to come up with something new. But alas, here we are. And I'm a good student, so I stuck with it.
Don't you feel so much richer being in the know, though? But to give you an idea of like the they're after you thing, right? Okay, so these books are written by these two guys, Connor Boyack and Elijah Stanfield. And there's these little notes from Elijah in the book. And one of them says, in quotes, people in power will always want you to feel afraid to speak the truth, right? And there's just tons of that. I mean, I went a step further. Amanda's not willing to sacrifice her algorithm sometimes and really end up in some sort of echo chamber of awfulness on social media. But I went and checked their social media, and holy cow, I mean, there are videos labeled with the emoji exclamation points, not the text ones, but like the red ones that are cartoony, that are like, they're coming for your children. I mean, like it's bonkers, right?
Uh-huh.
So, and this is the tame book. So just wait for the readers. Okay. So I will give credit where credit is due. I like the format. All right. I like the colors in the book, the fonts in the book. I think the layout of the book is good. It's engaging. It's an easy read, with one exception to the layout that we'll talk about in a little bit, where somehow they made the layout racist. I didn't even know you could make a book's layout racist, but they pulled it off. So that part I didn't love. But other than that, as far as like ease of reading, I liked that part. And they teach history in storybook format, which was better than any textbook I ever had in history class. So I liked it. The approach was great. That's pretty much where my compliments end. But I'm listen, fair and balanced. Okay. We're going to get heavy into Fox News conspiracies here today. So I'm going to go with the Fox News theme, fair and balanced. Do they still say that about themselves? I don't even know.
Probably, because they are not wedded to the truth. Okay, so I'm going to say I actually wasn't a huge fan of this particular storybook format. Again, just one of those differences. For me, they made connections between current events and events from hundreds of years ago. And for me, it often left me pretty confused as to what the point was or how we even got there. Part of that could have been that, I don't have a strong American history background. I have a political science background. I know quite a bit about world politics and things like that. And I have learned a lot of US history with my kiddo because he's really into that. So I think I have enough history background that I should have been able to make these connections, but I just couldn't see a lot of them. I was really confused about
Well,
a
it's
lot
like
of
a
it.
third grade textbook. Like, even if you don't have a
Yeah.
strong American history background, I feel like you would have gotten it if it wasn't.
Yeah. I mean, it was that thing. I just felt like they were just trying to make a lot of connections that I just didn't feel like were there. And so for me, that kind of put it in this like the storybook version. It just didn't work for me. I'm also I am sure that this let's talk about boring early history while also talking about how fun it is to attend a circus thing works for some people. But again, not my people, right? Like, not my people, but some people. So if I don't know why you're still listening to us, but if you're listening to us and you're like, the circus is amazing and there are absolutely no issues with how they exploit people and animals, and we love going to the circus every chance we get, maybe this book is for you.
I love it when they hit elephants with bull hooks. It's great. It's awesome.
It was a wonderful way to train animals in captivity. We should do it more often. I think it's awesome when they make lions leap through rings of fire because that is good for everyone. Right. So, okay. The first thing, if we're really going to have a serious talk about this, it's kind of oddball date range that the books cover. I don't really understand how or why. So the first American history book is 1215 to 1776. Okay, so 1776 makes sense. I get that. It's 550 years essentially. Like, I mean, okay. And then the second book, it's 1776 to 1791. And now when I first looked at it, I read it wrong and I thought it said 1991. And I was like, oh, okay, but like, no. The second book that is just as massive as the first one covers just a few years. And I don't get, like, we start in 1215 so that we can talk about Marco Polo, basically, because if you're going to start early on American history, you would never dream of starting more than 15,000 years ago with the native peoples of North America. Of course, you would start with Marco Polo in Europe.
Makes perfect sense, right?
Yeah.
But it's in line because it's a very standard whitewashed Eurocentric textbook for the most part.
I mean,
There's
there's surprised.
Right.
But not surprised.
Exactly. There were a few blips of inclusive language here and there. I mean, blips, which quite frankly shocked me when they occurred. I was like, whoa, but they were definitely not part of a consistent trend throughout the book. So, I mean, there's just really like some of them are so subtle. Some of it is blatantly like, what the hell? And we'll get to those too. But then there's some that are like a little bit more subtle. So on page 3, they're talking about Marco Polo and the Silk Road trade route and all that kind of stuff. And Mrs. Tuttle talks about the fact that there were wild animals and treacherous landscapes. You could also be attacked by bandits or arrested by kings who were uneasy about strangers coming through their countries. And it's like, I just love how they put it on these kings for being so unreasonable. And it's like, oh, you didn't like people coming in uninvited and exploiting your people and, all this kind. I can't imagine why not, right? But it's
Government overreach. Government overreach.
Exactly. That's the theme here. So we've got that. Then it gets a little bit more obvious. As I said, that does happen. On page 24, we've got a little blurb, a kind of a call out about different explorers who went out and were involved in colonizing other places. So the one about Columbus says Columbus spent years asking Europe's royalty to fund an Atlantic voyage, seeking a western route to the Orient. Finally, in 1492, the King and Queen of Spain agreed. His 4 voyages, here's where it gets good. His 4 voyages were successful, opening a period of exploration, conquest, and colonization that lasted for several centuries, because conquest and colonization are amazing. So I can see nothing but success there.
As long as you're going to the Orient, it's fine.
Right. Exactly. And then it continues in these blurbs from Elijah, who's one of the co-writers here, where he says, for example, think about how courageous Columbus and his crew must have been to travel out into the open sea, not knowing what they might find. What a pillar of courage. I mean, just amazing.
It was not motivated by riches or wealth and
no,
he was the only one jumping in a ship to go explore. There weren't tons of explorers setting out.
We owe him so much. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. Then to the secular point of view, there's a ton of references in here to religion. I don't know how people call these things secular, because in the early pages, when they're talking about the Silk Road, there's references. They'll mention other religions, and I mean mention them by name. They don't go into them. They don't talk about what they believe, anything like that. The names are mentioned as being things that are practiced in these far off places where they buy spices, take spices, whatever they do. Okay. Then on pages 28 and 29, we get this massive explanation about Christianity with the King James Bible. There's something here from Exodus chapter 20. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Matthew chapter 6, no one can serve 2 masters. Stuff in here about the Church of England, the Gutenberg Bible, the Geneva Bible, a Protestant group called the Puritans. I mean, it goes on and on and on. So other religions get a mention. Christianity, you get a full explanation. And then there's these references. So they'll talk about like, oh, he looked like Moses parting the Red Sea. That's on page 39. There's references in both this book and the Readers to the Golden Rule. So there's a lot of presumption that you understand these Christian references because they're not foreign to you. Christianity is the basis for everything that we're jumping off of, according to these books. So they're not terribly secular.
No, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. The Tuttle Twins talk about the Golden Rule a lot. It feels like in nearly all of their books. And so, again, I asked, how is this secular? That said, look, I have taught my kid about the Golden Rule. We've talked about it. We don't church. Our family doesn't church at all. I have taught my kid about the Golden Rule because Christianity is so prevalent in the United States. And I feel this is one of those things that's like a helpful cultural context. But please don't fool yourself by saying that this isn't Christian ideology wrapped up in some history. And if you're a Christian, I have no issues with that. I have no issues with whatever faith you believe in. And if you want to teach your kiddos the Bible, by all means, go for it. Like, faith can be a really good thing for individual people. I'm just not a big fan of mixing things together and being like, oh, well, here's your history curriculum all wrapped up in the Bible. And there is much to be said for keeping much of your curriculum secular and teaching your religion as your religion. And yeah.
Yep. Totally agree. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that I liked the formatting of the book for the most part. And so there are these little call out sections. Some are bigger than others, actually. Some of them are like 2-page spreads. So some of them are just like a quarter page type thing. And then some of them are really, really big. They're typically in a different background color. So the regular text is white background, black letters. But then you'll get these call out boxes that are a light orange or a light purple. And they're separate from the other things. Sometimes those are used for just random things that correlate to the story or align with the story. But what's really, really interesting when you read the book is whenever you're exposed to the perspective of Black, Indigenous, people of color, anyone who's not a white European Christian, basically, their perspective, their history, their context always goes in a call out box. It's not part of the standard thing. It's like the standard thing is white European Christian. And then, oh, by the way, here's a tidbit about people of color or indigenous people or something like that. It's kind of like in February when we talk about Black History Month and there's that saying that kind of goes around that's like Black history is American history.
Yeah.
They're not separate. And this book very much makes them separate, literally separate, right? It's in its own bubble. So, and it's pretty obvious. They also use some dated language, for example, except for in one section that I found, one section meaning one sentence, they use the term slaves instead of enslaved, things like that. There, and this is a 2022 book. This isn't old. We knew better when this book was written.
Yeah.
So it's not like you can say that it's super old and it's dated and maybe use that as justification. They also perpetuate some of the conservative deflections and the talking points that Fox News loves to spit out and things like that about slavery. Like, well, Irish people were indentured servants too. How come we don't recognize their suffering and this, that, and the other thing? Okay, completely different history. Or they bring that up. It's in the book. And then they also bring up the fact that, quote, it was even common for African people to do the capturing and selling of other Africans, which of course is one of those tropes by conservatives that was like, well, they sold their own people into slavery. So they're just perpetuating that here. I roll.
Yeah, like we aren't doing that right now. Own residents. Okay. So I'm going to say, again, because as much as we really, really dislike these books, we want to be fair. I actually genuinely liked the call out boxes. I think because I disliked the main story so much, I felt like, hey, look, like the pretty good information. Now, granted, it was of varying quality, but like generally, oh, the good information is just in the call out boxes. So I can ignore all of the other drivel and just read the call out boxes and I get some helpful, interesting information.
Yeah, it just had like, I can't even say separate but equal vibes. It was like definitely separate but unequal vibes, which is really what separate but equal was anyway. But so it was just like, why is that history not intermeshed with the other history was my big complaint over the whole thing. Okay, then we have similarly, there's on page 56 and 57, there's a 2-page spread with a map of the colonies. And it's got each colony is numbered. And then there's a little text box that goes with that number that tells you about the founding of those colonies. And again, nowhere in there does it talk about the indigenous people who were living on that land before white Europeans showed up. Nowhere. They're like, they didn't even exist. So it's incomplete history to say the least. So we've got that. 59. Now we're going to put some of the artwork from these books. We're going to create a story highlight on Instagram. We're Homeschool Moms Unfiltered on Instagram. Go look. As somebody who teaches World War II history, that's my main area that I teach. I've done entire classes on propaganda. And so there's subtlety in the pictures a lot of times. Sometimes it's not so subtle. We'll talk about that too. But on 59, for example, in the book, it's a call out and it says, consider this question. Do you think the governments today can do a better job than you at deciding what you should do with your life? Or how about this? What are the negative consequences when government controls what medicines you must take or are not allowed to take? What if they want to control where you can travel? What size your house must be? What kind of car you are allowed to drive? How children must be educated? Or in some countries, how many children you can have? And the photo at the bottom of the page is a bunch of Asian children lined up in school uniforms, rank and file. And it is such a clear nod to Chinese communism. It's just bananas. And so it's that subtle imaging that's being infiltrated into this.
It is. I mean, I'm going to say my family did not read the textbooks because they were just not going to go there. But I did At first, I avoided it, but I did ultimately give them the readers and say, you can read them, but we have to be able to talk about them. And my family is quite progressive. My kiddo especially is, and my husband is, but he did not grow up thinking that way. So sometimes he misses more subtle things. But they both completely missed a lot of those things. And then when I pointed out, like, well, did you notice this? Did you see how there was this? And they were like, oh, gosh, this is horrible. And that's the real concern about this.
It's subtle.
It's subtle, but there is absolutely no way that your kiddo finishes reading a couple of these books and doesn't have some of these thoughts already sort of embedded in their belief system. When it's that, like, those red pill creators, are you making sure that your kid's not consuming these awful creators on social media and, like, and having these thoughts that you totally don't agree with, just sort of like gently embedded in their general beliefs without even realizing it, right? Because of the way that it's done. It's a real problem right now.
Yeah.
It's pretty bad.
Okay. We've got on page 78, there's a section here, and this is not the first time that this was brought up. It's just the first time that I finally made a note about it because I was like, man, do they keep banging this drum on the top of page 78 is the note that I put there. But there's a whole lot of focus in these books about how you cannot judge historical figures by today's ethics. And listen, that's a difficult topic to discuss. I mean, it really, really is because it's like, what's fair, what's not fair, etc. But then, for example, on page 219, there's a blurb here about the 1700s and during the time of slavery in the United States. And it says, many people were so ignorant and arrogant that they believed their slaves were less than human. And they also feared that if they let them go, the slaves would attack them in revenge. Well, if they're attacking you in revenge and that's a legitimate fear you have, you're doing something fucking wrong. I get to judge you on that.
Exactly. If you're treating a dog so badly that you're afraid it's going to come back and bite you, stop treating the dog that way. And it's really easy to extrapolate that to human relationships. Like, that's not about, like, well, in the old days.
Yeah, exactly. They didn't know better. They damn well knew better.
Yeah, absolutely did.
Then there's a part in here that's actually just wrong, where it's a call out box because, some of the negativity got put it in the call out box. Like, to your point, that's where the juice was. That's where the actual legitimate history and information was for the most part, right? So it's a whole box about Thomas Jefferson and the tradition of slavery. And one of the bullet points says his wife, Martha, and many of his children died. Sally Hemings, an enslaved woman, bore 6 children, who many believe were fathered by him. He freed them upon reaching adulthood. He might have kept the relationship a secret, as it was illegal to marry interracially until 1967. Do you honestly fucking believe that's why? No, of course not, right? I mean, he knew what he was doing was wrong. And it's not even true. He did not free most of his children. It's a huge point of contention about Jefferson that he went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and didn't do it. And some of them moved north, basically to where they just kind of became free and no one bugged them about anything. He didn't do it. It wasn't like this come to Jesus meeting that he had in his own head. Since we're on the topic of religion infiltrating everything today, we'll go with that one. He didn't do it. So it's just not even correct, but it paints him in a better light that way. So let's go in the Tuttle Twins book. Yep. The other time where we rewrite history in a call out box, which is really fun, is on page 91. And it's talking about Ohio and the land in Ohio and the indigenous people of Ohio. And the first sentence in this call out box says, British colonists had been in violent competition for the land with native people for hundreds of years. Violent competition, is that the way of saying that? When you tried to steal their land, they fought back, that they could we maybe rephrase that to be what it actually was? Because it's not accurate. So there's plenty of that in here.
Yeah. Okay, now look, we're like not even halfway through the book. We could go on and on and on. There are like dozens and dozens of examples. We're going to give one last example in this book before we move on to the next one. So on page 103, the Tuttle Twins were back in present time. They're watching a debate on TV, like the ones between the presidential and VP nominees that always happen. And they're taking notes for an educational activity. The sister says, so what have you written down so far? And the brothers the woman is Jan Jennings, and she's a conservative. And the man is Robert Dunworth, and he's, well, I don't know. she calls him a terrorist, but he calls himself a liberal, whatever that is. So, all right, like aside, hello, he apparently knows what a conservative is, but he's very confused about what a liberal is. Okay. And then he goes on and he says, I keep hoping they'll actually answer the questions, but they seem interested in calling each other names. Okay. So, first off, talk about a Fox News talking point. This idea that no one in the debates ever answers any questions. That is not true. The debates have gotten worse over the years, but even the most recent round of debates, questions absolutely got answered. Points were put out, platforms were shared, more so by one side of the aisle than the other side of the aisle. So, hello, Fox News talking point. But also, it's this sort of deeply biased stuff that we see over and over in Tuttle Twins books. He's clear that she's a conservative. And maybe the other guy is a liberal, but the woman keeps saying he's a terrorist. And he isn't getting much more from it because they just keep calling each other names. But the only name he mentions is the conservative calling the liberal a terrorist. But sure, they're both equally bad. Right. Like, yeah. So we can go on and on. Like I said, we can go we could keep pulling out examples, but I think you're getting the idea.
Yes.
The second book is super similar, right? It's not like suddenly it changed. It's just covers a lot fewer years and a lot more pages. But I'll pull out a few specific examples because that's what we said we were going to do for you so that you know exactly what we have here. So one example is on page 66. There's another one of these call out boxes, and it sort of talks about the Federal Reserve. I think they are using a story about the creature of Jekyll Island, which is one of their readers that talks about how like the Federal Reserve was actually created. And so they're talking about creatures and monsters. And if I'm understanding all the metaphors correctly, which again, is written for a third grader. So if me as like a political science major is a little confused about all of these, like I'm pretty sure that the creature is the Federal Reserve. And it says the creature, quote, is the reason inflation is happening and why prices keep going up. So, I mean, the Federal Reserve is only, which, and I don't understand how you can be like even remotely educated and believe that the Federal Reserve is like fundamentally and across the board bad. But it does seem appropriate for what's currently happening, right? Well, yeah, it is. So then another example, right? Around page 230, they don't do a great job of numbering all of the pages. So it's a little hard to find exact page numbers. And at this point, I was pretty frustrated. So I didn't count specifically, but it's around page 230. In the chapter on the Bill of Rights, the kids are at the circus because talk about good, wholesome family fun that we don't know any better about in the 21st century. The kids talk about how they almost got arrested. These books are bizarrely obsessed with depicting government officials almost arresting these two white upper middle class 9-year-old kids. I like.
Yeah,
Okay.
because it comes up in the education vacation. I hadn't read the book you're talking about, but it came up in the other one.
I
Both on it there.
Yeah. No, they are bizarrely obsessed with these very privileged white children being arrested by government officials. And the pictures are all like, it's a whole thing. And it's ridiculous. I mean, like, there are people in the United States who need to be worried about this. There are people around the world who need to be worried about it. It is not the affluent white children. Like, just stop already. Okay, so then towards the end of the book, last example in this specific book, there we again see this sentiment that is sprinkled throughout everything Tuttle Twins that says, Grandma replied, remember, politicians will do, and the twins said in unison, whatever the people let them do. And for me, it's this constant indoctrination that politicians, and honestly, most people, are inherently bad unless they go to church with them. And those people are an exclusion. But for me, it's just too much. Like, it is woven into the story, whatever book you're reading, over and over again. And like I said before, I don't see how there's any way that a kid reads more than one of these books and doesn't start to think that that's really just the reality of things. And I know, frankly, I personally refuse to believe that most people are inherently bad and just looking to take advantage of others. I don't think that that's human nature. I think there are people like that, but I don't think you have to find God to be a good person. I don't think you have to have the threat of heaven and hell hanging over you to make good choices and to do better. And I think politics is really complicated. Like I said, I worked in politics at a much younger age. It's really complicated, and you have to sell your soul to the devil to be able to accomplish anything. And I don't agree with the way that works. But that doesn't mean that politicians are all evil and fundamentally want terrible things for us. Like that's just not the reality of things.
No, it's sad. And it's all through these books. So we're going to talk about the readers. This is where it really gets juicy. Okay. This is where, woo, get ready. Okay. Before we do, really, really quick, we've talked about it before. We have courses that you can take online. If you're new to homeschooling or you're thinking about starting to homeschool, we have a Homeschool 101 course that'll give you the full foundation that you need to homeschool, everything from deschooling to laws to setting intentions, your learner's style, your homeschooling philosophy, all that stuff is in there. But then if you were like, darn it, I was looking at the Tuttle Twins and now I have no curriculum plan, we have a curriculum course and it does not include the Tuttle Twins. So we have a curriculum course. We have a course for both preschool and kindergarten. And then we have a course for everything beyond kindergarten. So we will link them in the show notes. They're all there. But if you're looking to not have to do this sort of level of analysis for every single program that you're considering, we've already done it for you. Pretty much Amanda's done it for you. But we've got it. It's all there. There's workbooks, so it gets hands-on. We've got you covered. So check out the show notes. Come take class with us. We will get you on the right track that goes in the complete opposite direction of the Tuttle Twins.
Yeah, that's it. And the thing too is, like the curriculum course, we call it a curriculum course because a lot of homeschoolers live in states where they have to provide what their curriculum is, or a lot of homeschoolers are like me, academic progressives or whatever, and they just want more curriculum focused. But really, it's a resources course. It's just tons and tons of things of like, this is, if you're struggling figuring out math, like here's kind of the continuum of math from easier to most rigorous. Or, here are some science options that you can look into. Here's what concurrent and dual enrollment means. And here's some resources you might tap into to be able to do some of that stuff. There's just so many resources that can be useful for anyone who wants to learn for themselves or educate their kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, let's get back to it. So we have the train wreck reader books. Okay, so I read Education Vacation, The Law, Fate of the Future, and The Guide to True Conspiracies, and then a little bit of Beware Your Biases because I was curious exactly what was happening with that. So which ones did you read, Meagan?
I read also the Education Vacation. I read the Leviathan Crisis, which is and the Tuttle Twins Guide to True Conspiracies. True. They're true. They're not
True conspiracies. Yes.
Yeah. True conspiracies.
Yes. We are letting you know the conspiracy and how the wool was pulled over your eyes, except for the one where we're like, but actually we don't. Oh, but we included it here. So you make your own decision.
Yeah. So between that whole collection of disaster, where would you like to start?
Well, we both read Education Vacation, so let's start there.
Sound good?
For me, right? First, this book is dedicated to John Taylor Gatto. And we all know how much I dislike him. So there's that. Basically, the kids in this book are going with their public school teacher and their parents to a lecture by good old John, who is looking surprisingly spry for a dead guy. On page 28.
That's one of the conspiracy theories. He's not dead.
There you go. He didn't actually die. He's still here. And we love it. Okay. So, like I was saying, on page 128, there's a quote. It says, "At school, these little minds are filled with ideas," Mr. Gatto said. "But whose ideas are they? And what are the motives of those in charge?" Ethan, who's one of the Tuttle twins, didn't like the idea he was being shaped into what somebody else wanted. And I was like, seriously, again, if public school curriculum is too woke for you, I worry about you teaching your own children. I'm just going to put that out there. But also, these books are full of this nonsense. This idea of like, I want to form my own idea and my own and be my own person, but I'm also going to read these deeply biased propaganda books to do just that. Okay. So also in this book, there's a lot of stuff about how compulsory education is bad. I again, like Megan and I do not agree on everything. I'm going to put that out there. If you've listened to us long enough, you know this. I generally disagree with this. I think poor compulsory education is what got the United States into the dumpster fire it is. But to me, saying compulsory education is bad is like saying our free volunteer fire department isn't well trained and takes too long to put out our house fires. So I think we should just completely get rid of the fire department altogether. Who needs it? Like, well, those government funds that are helping, at least make sure that you've got a fire truck and the ability for someone to come and try to put out your fire are still pretty freaking important. Like, maybe keep it. It's still going to work better than your buckets. Like, I just don't. Okay. Then, of course, this book in particular is full of other little bullshit. Sorry. I'm on a roll. This was rough for me. And again, I disagree with it if you couldn't tell by the way I described it. So there you have terms like Jewish slaves, which we covered before, but come on, like at this point, we know better. We know to use better language, implying that the governments feed their people to distract them from the bad stuff that they're doing. Because, again, socialism and communism and handouts are always bad. There is it does not matter which Tuttle Twins book you're reading, any sort of handout or giving of anything to people by the government is like just bad. And then again, we mentioned it before, but the 9-year-old twins are nearly arrested by a scary cop with artwork to drive home the point of just how scary the whole situation is. Because of course they are.
They're always in danger of being legitimately arrested. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I agree with you on tons of it. The really interesting thing is I am not as deeply opposed to John Taylor Gatto as you are. I actually quite agree with a bunch of stuff that he said. I read his op-ed that was in the Wall Street Journal when he retired from teaching and all that kind of stuff. And so I, as an unschooler, lean into a bunch of things that he thinks. Yet the way it was communicated in this book, and especially the way the artwork is portrayed, still gave me the major icks. I mean, it was just disgusting. And I was already kind of on board with the messaging, but they still managed to somehow poison it, right? So, I mean, again, on page 14, I literally made a note on the side of my book that says this is Goebbels level propaganda artwork. If you don't know who Joseph Goebbels was, he was the Ministry of Communication in Nazi Germany who was putting out all of this artwork. And I've analyzed it with students over the years, right? And nothing about these pieces of artwork is an accident, right? You'll look at the proud German artwork from that era, and you've got like this strong guy, and he's got the Aryan characteristics, and he's got a smile, and his posture looks proud, and the flag is behind him. What are you supposed to feel when you see a flag? You're supposed to feel patriotism and this and that, right? None of it is an accident. It's all so subtly crafted to communicate things. And so I've gone through this so much that when I'm reading this, I'm like, oh, this is Joseph Goebbels reincarnated. Like, it's just horrific, the level of stuff that's in here. I mean, there's literally in the history textbook one, it's got this dark, ominous background to it. And it's the kids are marionettes on strings being forced to do all of this stuff that's against their will because of government control. I mean, it's next level propaganda artwork. So it's pretty bad. Then over dramatization, like Amanda said, the arrest is one. Then on page 15 and 16, there's quotes here where Ethan, one of the twins, says, parents get in trouble if their kids aren't taught the way the government wants. And Mr. Tuttle replies, yes, the government might take the children from their home, or the parents might be put in jail. I mean, it's just like this hideous fear-mongering. It's so ridiculous. So then they go on to bash this guy, John Dewey, who is kind of the foil to John Taylor Gatto in the story. So I dug into who he was because I wasn't super familiar with him. So according to Encyclopedia Britannica, which maybe it's like Merriam-Webster and it's also part of the deep state, I don't know. But according to them, quote, the common theme underlying Dewey's philosophy was his belief that a democratic society of informed and engaged inquirers was the best means of promoting human interests, end quote. Well, do you get now why he's the villain in this book? Democratic state, informed people? No.
Nope. Nope.
Can't
Nope.
have
Nope. Can't.
Then on 29 and 30, we literally have an image at the top of the page. It goes across the 2-page spread that's got textbooks that have one has kindergarten in it, and it's got the German eagle from the Nazi era on it. And it's written in that like German font that we would see on posters. Then you've got what I think is Japanese on another book. Then we've got the hammer and sickle from the Soviet era with the Cyrillic letters on another book. There's a Nazi flag. There's people doing the Nazi salute. And all of this is to make you afraid. There's a book here that's got redacted information in it to show you the government control. I mean, it's just ridiculous. What I have taught my students is propaganda can be defined in these ways. It appears in a variety of forms. So it can be news, it can be song, it can be video, it can be pictures, it can be words, it can be all these things. It is strategic and intentional. There is absolutely nothing in this image that's an accident. It aims to influence attitudes, opinions, and behaviors. This sure as fuck does. It can be beneficial or harmful. Okay. So you can have positive propaganda. There's plenty of times we see that. But the most successful propaganda taps into our deepest values, fears, hopes, and dreams. And this clearly goes into values, fears, etc. To Amanda's point, there's a thing in here about the ancient Romans being fed as a distraction to all the bad things their government was doing. And the kids were like, oh, that's horrible. We should definitely learn from that lesson. And then the dramatization about them being nearly arrested in Germany because they were out during the day and school is compulsory in Germany. And so a police officer saw them and was like, why aren't you in school? And their interpretation of that was they were almost arrested, which was not at all part of the thing. But the fact is, like, you and I have both been to Germany. There's tons of kids walking around during the day. They're fucking tourists. Like, nobody stops you.
And it's not like throughout Europe, public education and education in brick and mortar schools is compulsory in the vast majority of countries in Europe. We have spent months living and world schooling throughout Europe during regular school terms and regular school hours. My 11-year-old has never once been approached, asked why he wasn't in school, right? Like, it's just doesn't, like, what? Yeah.
You don't take him out on outings with bail money in his pocket and like be like John Lewis and put like a book and a sandwich and an apple in his backpack in case he gets arrested and he needs to sit in jail.
Yeah.
Freaking ridiculous.
Yep. Yep. For real. Okay. So I read a couple that you didn't. I'm not going to go into the beware your biases. It's one of those, I think of all of them, there's one about fallacies and beware your biases. And I think of all of them, I would be most likely to read them and noodle them a little more. Because yes, of course, everything here is like biased and there's a lot of propaganda, but they are bringing up interesting things to like think about, and like, and those specifically, I was like, okay, like the examples, I'm like, oh, of course, Tuttle Twins, bullshit examples. But what it's actually talking about and encouraging you to think about, and like, hey, yeah, okay, I can see that, that's interesting. That's some good food for thought. Like, I wonder how that plays out, and you come up with your own examples. It wasn't atrocious. That said, I don't feel that way about many of the others that I read. So let's start with the law. This book is teaching about Frederick Bastiat. I guess is how you say it. It's a French name. I will say I didn't find this one quite as offensive, probably because I don't necessarily agree with this economist, but it's an economic theory. There are lots of economic theories out there. And so I'm happy to read about and learn about different ideas and be like, well, I don't agree with that. And that's not how it goes. For me, it's like trickle down economics. They don't work. Like I'm happy to read things about it and ideas, I still know it doesn't work. So anyway, we get a nice dose of God and how, quote, our rights are from God on page 23. So, I always love when my book about law tells me about how my rights are from God. The kids go to their neighbor, Fred. Fred is a good old guy. I think he's maybe French, like originally French, if I'm remembering correctly from one of them. He shows up in most of the reader books. He's an older white guy who's like the pillar of educated intellectualism in their neighborhood. And he discusses how he likes to help people, but he doesn't like the government forcing him to help people. I gotta say, I have never seen or heard of a government that forces people to volunteer, like just forces like their citizenry to volunteer. But I'm assuming what he actually means is like to pay into social security safety nets, like those whole things. We're like, oh, so he employs people. And when he no longer employs those people because his business didn't thrive or he decided to retire, and now all of those people need unemployment or government health or whatever, like he shouldn't have to pay for that. Like, yeah, it's a standard like Tuttle Twins libertarian talking point of we shouldn't have to pay for benefits that we don't use, even though they do, in fact, use them. They very much like the paved roads that we have, and they very much think that they should have access to fire departments and whatever else. For me, the worst part of this book, the law, is so you've got white kids with their white parents and their well educated white neighbor. And then they talk about another neighbor that Fred often shares his homegrown produce with. And he's using an example of how, like, well, I share it with her, but how bad would it be if she came in the middle of the night and took tomatoes from my garden without permission? I'm like, well, first off, if she needed tomatoes from your garden and she took a few, like, I don't think that's like worthy of going to jail, but that's basically what they're implying. And of course, they show a picture of her dressed up as a night robber stealing tomatoes to really drive it home, because none of these books are complete without this insane propaganda artwork. After this whole discussion, and good old Fred feels like the kids understand what he's talking about and what he wants them to get from the conversation, he gives the kids a can of home canned tomatoes. And they talk about it and they decide that they're going to do the kind thing, like Fred said, and make their own decision to give it away. They give it away to the neighbor that was being discussed. And of course, her name is Mrs. Lopez, and she's got a baby on her hip. And it's just kind of one of those, like, just a little bit of racism for the road. Again, it's not like super in your face. When my family read it, they didn't really see it. But I was like, did you notice anyone else that wasn't white in the book? Like, no, only the person who got given food. And she had a baby on her hip because, of course, what kind of stereotypes can we play into?
Well, and this we'll get to it when we talk about another book, but it's the same thing in another book too. So it's a pattern. It's not even
Yeah.
like you could say like, oh, it was just they missed it or it was an unconscious bias. No, it happens again.
No, it happens. Yeah, it happens again and again, over and over. So then, so that's the law. And that was like the least offensive one I read. So that's saying something. Then I read The Fate of the Future, which is basically a book all about how to avoid becoming a dystopian nightmare, which, if you kind of read through the lines, but actually you don't really have to read through the lines. It's essentially Europe. Europe is the dystopian nightmare. So on page 51, it says, quote, in a dystopian world, taxes are really high. And then it goes on, they explain, our idea is that the state should be like other companies where you pay for what you use. My dad says it's called a user fee. That way, people don't have to pay for things they don't want. So I'm just going to say, again, same theme that we just talked about in the law, right? Like this kind of stuff happens, these themes over and over. And they're making sure the kids really understand this. There's also a lot of discussion about how states and countries use coercion instead of persuasion. Again, pretty standard talking point about how bad people are outside of church. And I'm still over it, right? It doesn't really matter how many times they bring it up and how many different books, I'm still over it. And then the book wraps up with a discussion about how governments shouldn't be monopolies and how we should be able to choose essentially different companies for different services like protection and justice. We shouldn't all have we shouldn't all have to use the same source for protection. We shouldn't have to use the same judges and court system for justice. I mean, for me, like, this is just that, like, it's the naive, unrealistic fundamental flaw in libertarianism. We're already seeing this effort to decentralize the federal government, turning it over to states' rights, but then states trying to impose their rights on other states. And if you leave our state and you do something we don't like, we'll punish you when you come back to our state, even though what you did in the other state was perfectly fine and legal. Or this whole, we'll take over your city from your elected officials because you elected people we didn't agree with. And so we disagree with how they're running things. Like, you can't, you can't let people pick and choose who enforces, that's not, society doesn't work that way. Like, yeah. there are problems, right? Like, I'm not going to sit here and say like, oh, we've got it figured out. I mean, it totally, like, the way it works is totally awesome. Like that, I'm not saying that, but this is not the solution. This is a very naive, unrealistic solution that is only going to be like so much worse. Kind of like, again, not, like, I don't like the way our volunteer fire department works. So let's just not have a fire department. Like, this is dumb. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. The propaganda machine, I will say, is a higher notch in the Leviathan crisis. That is not the tame experience that I had in reading this book. The title alone is a religious reference. Leviathan is a sea serpent demon that's noted in theology and mythology. It's referenced in several books of the Bible, including Psalms, the book of Job, the book of Isaiah. It is often the embodiment of chaos threatening to eat the damned when their lives are over. So, like, dramatic a little bit, possibly. Not for the Tuttle Twins, but maybe for the rest of us.
Yeah.
So this book is the anti-socialism lesson. It's not like a side note or a subtle undercurrent beneath the main lesson. It is the lesson of this book. Okay. Complete with, we have campaign posters in the drawings that are 100% Bernie Sanders posters, but except now she is a woman named Bernadine. Okay. And not just any Bernadine, she's Bernadine Lopez, because of course, who wants government handouts more than Hispanic people, right? According to this storyline. And that's not me speaking. My husband is Hispanic. Clearly, I don't feel that way. But in the Tuttle Twins world, anytime there's a socialist demon, they're Hispanic.
That's not fair. They're people of color, not just Latino or Hispanic. Okay, like people of color. They're those Chinese, those Japanese, like those brown people, like they're Black people. They're all like, if you're a person of color, all they're here for handouts.
Yeah, it's all about the handout. Okay, yeah, that's what this book hits home. So, and I mean, I'm telling you, the font of the Bernadine sign, the colors, everything. It's a Bernie Sanders sign. It's so fucked up. So the people in the artwork, when they're talking about socialism, like when Mr. Tuttle is explaining socialism to his kids, you should see the horrified look on all their faces. They're in the car and they all look like they've just been told that like their grandma and 150 other people that they love and care about have just died. It's just, they're like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. So we've got that. Then there's a quote on page 23 about people not taking personal responsibility anymore. Oh, so it's a woman who works at the company that Mr. Tuttle owns with a business partner. And she says, well, people used to value personal responsibility, but now when there are problems, people cry out for someone to save them, even to make choices for them. They act like children. No offense. And she winked at the twins. Okay. Then on page 27 and 28, we have some quotes about the fact that once you allow socialism to take hold, there's no stopping it. So she said, Mary, the same lady, says, oh, just like the Leviathan, government never really shrinks. It's like a ratchet effect where things only go in one direction. And then on the next page, Mary continues. She's a real harbinger of doom here. She says there are so many examples. After a terrorist attack, government claimed power to spy through everyone's electronic devices. When people struggled to afford healthcare, the government tried to control it and force all people to buy healthcare plans they didn't want. And when there was a virus, government decided which businesses could stay open and whether or not we could meet with friends. We couldn't even sing at church without permission. And the imagery is so good and evil, monsters, darkness, battle for humanity. I mean, it's so over the top, it's not even funny. Yeah. So then my favorite part, Mr. Tuttle is having a debate with his business partner about whether or not they should take like a stimulus from the government, basically. And his business partner is all for it. And Mr. Tuttle is all for individual choice and not doing that. Guess what color his business partner is? Hint, he's not a white man. And then they have to lay off an employee, Rebecca, who they really love, but they have to lay her off because they're going to take the personal responsibility route, tighten their belts, lay some people off, not take the government money. So they call, and Rebecca's in tears in the picture. And she's like, if you could use the government stimulus, it could save my job. But again, guess what? Rebecca's not white. So everybody who wants the government handout, not white. Nope, nope, nope.
Yep.
Good times. So it's not an accident. It's a consistent theme that happens again and again and again.
So then we both read the conspiracy theories book, complete with a chapter about Hunter Biden's laptop and COVID and 9/11. I mean, this book was a doozy because again, you have to remember, like, these are true conspiracies. Okay, like they want you to know that these conspiracies, they're actually true, and they're going to share the truth with you. So some of the ones that I pulled out that I was like, oh my goodness, specific things. There's discussion about Ukraine. They say, quote, the small country of Ukraine led by a professional actor. I'm like, okay, well, first off, Ukraine is the largest country in Europe proper, the largest one that's actually wholly in Europe. Okay, so there's that. It's the 45th largest country in the world, which makes it move in the top 25% of countries around the world. And also, are we not led by a TV personality? I mean, like, not even an actor, like just a straight up TV personality. But okay, like, let's throw shade where shade isn't due. Then there's another section, a new conspiracy about Mockingbird, Mockingjay, Operation something bird. But it starts out with this quote. It says, the 1950s and 60s were an idyllic time in America. The Second World War was fading into the past and taking with it all the memories of hardship and suffering. There was a general feeling of hope and a promise of prosperity covering most of the country. Husbands went to work in tailored suits and came home to adoring children, tidy homes, and loving wives. There was finally time again for leisure, art, and music. Plus, movies were flooding even the smallest towns with culture and excitement. But perhaps the most exciting thing of all was the availability and affordability of the black and white television. Now, there's a whole lot wrong with that. But the 1950s and 60s, like, just super high level. You got the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the entire civil rights fight with people being beaten and hung and blasted with water hoses. You got the assassination of Kennedy, the assassination of MLK Jr. Like, the 50s and 60s were not the ideal time that they're like portraying here. But again, it's this like these ridiculous talking points, right? Are we going to make America great? When was America great? The 50s and 60s. I'm like, actually, Leave It to Beaver isn't real. And there was like a whole lot of context. Again, not thing. There's a whole lot of context that you're choosing to just completely ignore and leave out. So it makes it not actually true, despite the fact that you're proclaiming that here's the truth behind these conspiracies. So yeah, then they talk about the Hunter Biden laptop. It's just ridiculous. They want to make sure that this book was only published this year in 2025, but they want to make sure that that it was buried and hidden, and that's not the whole truth. The government just doesn't want you to have that information. I find it really hard to believe that if there was anything actually there, like, how would we not have them at this point? Trump's been in office for
the Bidens, while not, billionaires, they have a few bucks. If Hunter Biden's laptop was broken, he'd go to Best Buy and buy a new fucking laptop. He's not going to take it to some shady ass, like, you break, we fix cell phone place and drop it off to get it fixed, which is where this laptop came from. Like, hello.
Well, yeah. And I mean, people come out like, oh, it's totally, like, I lied, and all of this, like, but you cannot believe the people, right? That's this conspiracy theory book is every chapter is a different conspiracy. And the basic point is you cannot believe the people and you cannot believe the government because everyone will lie to you and everyone is lying to you. That's what they want you to understand. Again, common Tuttle Twins theme. There's one about COVID, which is a whole other thing. And if you listen to us at all, I have strong feelings about a lot around that. But they're very angry that the government thought that they could try to protect other people from their stupidity. And then for me, like, I don't really know how I can say that it was the straw that broke the camel's back because the whole damn thing broke my back. But 9/11, it covers 9/11. And it's basically like, okay, so first off, you have to remember that it's in the book about true conspiracies, right? So like, these are things that what you have been told is wrong. And we're going to tell you the truth about it. And they go through all of it. And then at the end, like one of the very last bullet points is like, maybe it was all a plot by the president, the vice president, or some bullshit like that. But then actually, maybe what they tell us is what really happened. And like they were just really lackadaisical and didn't take it serious enough. But maybe not. But you can totally make your own decision on this. But also, they put it in a book about true conspiracies. So I don't really think your decision is supposed to be like, I think actually you're wrong, and that this was actually just a series of bad things that happened. Like, I don't think that the vice president was really, so this is their theory, right? The vice president wanted the plane to hit the Pentagon to help hide the fact that they had embezzled $2 trillion or something. Like, yes. Yep.
Mhm. I think the general concept of this book for me was kind of like what Trump does and what Fox News does, where they lay out a breadcrumb trail and then they go, but I don't know. I'm just saying it could be.
Just
Only,
yes.
right? Only in this book, it's labeled the true conspiracy theories. But you know how Trump is like, we're going to have to look into that. And then all his idiot followers take it as like the absolute truth. And it's just him throwing out hypotheses that have absolutely no
Random,
foundation.
yeah, random
And that's
ass
what this
ideas.
is.
No,
Right.
no, totally. I mean, there's an image of a person holding what is there's ventriloquist. One of the images, right, talking about they're so big on their imagery. So there's someone with a ventriloquist with his hand up the back of his dummy. And the guy has a name tag. He's the CIA, and the dummy is CNN because the CIA just is just tells CNN what to say and do. And I mean, the whole rest of the world is completely wrong for watching CNN and believing that there's any credibility at all. Like, we know better than that, right? Just, yeah.
It's bananas. The other thing that I loved in these books is it, for each conspiracy theory, there's kind of a flow. They've got different sections, and then it's like, but what could it be? And all this kind of stuff. But there's a Latin phrase that they use in there, which I found really, really interesting that they chose to use Latin. So it's qui bono, which means like you're looking for a crime suspect or like who benefits from this. Like dig deeper into that, right? And it reminds me of the people who use DEI. And it's like, no, if you are against diversity, equity, and inclusion, please say that, because hiding behind the phrase DEI or the acronym DEI is bullshit. And so it's like they've done that in this book by using this Latin phrase that's basically like someone is benefiting from this and there's a criminal element to this and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, well, then just come out and say that. Don't be such an asshole, you know? But I mean, there's cloud seeding during the Vietnam War in here that they made it rain at different times. It was raining when it shouldn't have been and dry when it should have been and whatever. And that was all the US government. 9/11 was an inside job. I mean, all this kind of stuff. The whole book it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be honest. But maybe it was because I read that one last and I was numb to it by then. I don't know.
There were just so like, for me, this was the ultimate example of there was a kernel of truth, right? And this is the problem. There was a kernel of truth in it. And then they leave out all context. There's the story about how how we ended up in the Gulf War, and the 15-year-old woman, the young woman who testified in front of Congress. And it was a huge mistake. And it should never have happened the way that it did. It did not get properly vetted. And and it's a real embarrassment. But the idea that like the president and the head of the committee and all of these people knew exactly who she was, and they knew she was a paid actor, like, except they left out the fact that Amnesty International had corroborated her story before she testified in front of Congress. And like, when things are moving fast, things come up, right? Investigative journalists find things out. More stuff comes out, and that's important. Investigative journalism is important. But if you tell a story like you're telling the truth and you completely leave out important context, like, well, other independent organizations corroborated her story. So like we thought, like with the information we had at the time, we thought that this was a good call. When you leave that kind of stuff out, you've just completely, how am I ever supposed to believe anything that you're saying? But I'm going to guess that the vast majority of people who read a book like this aren't hitting Google every page to be like, what what's the truth about that? Like, what is the story with that? Or like, I know that's not true. I don't know exactly what part of it's not true, but I know that that's not the whole story. And that's where it's really dangerous. We have a real crisis in the United States, possibly around the world, but especially in the United States, where people lack critical thinking. And it's one thing to not have the knowledge. It's an entirely other thing to lack critical thinking skills and to not be able to say, that doesn't seem right. Let me go do some research on that.
And then look at the research and look at the sources and who's saying the things and evaluate those things to be like, what is their stake in this? I mean, we looked in the back of the Tuttle Twins books. There's a list of contributors who financially help the Tuttle Twins organization and blah, blah, blah. We went through the list to see who these people were, what their horse was in this race, all that. Betsy DeVos is in their PS, so it's like, who's the financial, where's the money coming from? What is their influence over this and all that kind of stuff, right? And people don't do that. They just take everything at face value for the most part now. A certain select group of people, like not everybody, but that's too broad of a generalization, but it's happening too often now, right?
It is happening too often. And again, the thing is, we are a secular podcast. We're a secular community. We're secular across the board. If you really want to use some kind of religious curriculum, I don't church at all. I don't want that in my sphere at all, but I review a lot of curriculum, both personally and for the show and for the things that we do. I can say wholeheartedly, there are significantly better religious curriculum out there. If you feel really strongly about using a curriculum that has Christian ideology woven throughout, for the love of God, please don't use the Tuttle Twins. You claim you love God, don't Tuttle Twins.
Yeah. All right. Oh my goodness. All right. We had a long episode today, but the details needed to be there, right? We couldn't just say they're horrendous, don't buy them. We needed to back it up and bring some quotes and some specifics. Go to our Instagram story, look at the highlights. You have to see the artwork. It's worse in some ways than the words. It's just bad. So our mantra for this week's episode is the loudest voices in homeschool circles aren't always the most trustworthy. Dig deeper. And I will say that this mantra has a double meaning for me. Number one, the Tuttle Twins. But then number two, the thing that stuck in my head to when I brought up doing this episode, and Amanda probably thought I was insane, was there's an influencer that we both follow who drives me batshit crazy. Like I should unfollow for my own mental health, but I can't. So she'll hawk anything. As long as the check clears, she's got a coupon code for you. And we see her do it all the time. I mean, if her kids were really using the amount of programs that she's got an affiliate code for, her kids would be homeschooling 37 hours a day. She's just in it for the money. And it's really gross because she has a massive following. So it's working. But anyway, that's also a loud voice in this homeschool sphere. So be careful who you listen to, because we get nothing. We get nothing from any homeschool curriculum companies. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. The Tuttle Twins certainly aren't giving us any money after today's episode. So just the loud voices, please be careful. If you have questions, take our curriculum course, come to our Patreon. We have a Q&A session. Come talk to Amanda about curriculum. But the people with the affiliate codes do not have your best interest at heart. They have their own best interest at heart. And we watch this lady do it all freaking day long. So just saying. Well, friends, happy homeschooling with something other than the Tuttle Twins books.
Yes, please. Yes. And then have a great one. Have a good week.